David was a 26-year-old college dropout, struggling to make ends meet in Chicago. After months of searching, he found a listing that seemed too good to be true. A massive, two-story farmhouse on the edge of town, for rent at a price cheaper than a single-room apartment. The landlord, an old man with pale skin and shaking hands, gave him only one warning: don't stay after midnight in the East Wing. David laughed it off, thinking it was just a superstition to keep kids out of the old rooms. He signed the lease and moved in the very next day. At first, the house seemed fine, dusty, creaky, but livable. Yet, as night fell, David noticed something strange: the mirrors. Every mirror in the house, on the walls, in the bathroom, even on old wardrobes, was covered with sheets of white cloth, almost like the house didn't want him to look. He uncovered one, and for just a second, he swore he saw his reflection blink, even though his own eyes hadn't. That night, as David tried to sleep, the house spoke for the first time, not in words, but in whispers. A chorus of voices, faint and overlapping, crawling through the walls. And just as the clock struck 12:01 a.m., a slow knock echoed from the East Wing, the wing the landlord warned him about. David froze, his phone flickered and died, the air turned heavy, and in the silence, he realized the knocking wasn't on the door, it was coming from inside the walls. David tried to convince himself he was imagining things. "Old houses make noises," he whispered, though his own voice sounded hollow in the dark. But the next morning, something was different. On his living room wall, faint marks appeared, as if someone had pressed their hands against the plaster from the inside. 5 fingers, long, thin, pressed deep enough to crack the paint. David scrubbed the wall, painted over it, and tried to ignore it. But the next night, the whispers returned, louder this time. He could almost make out words, fragments of sentences. "Don't look at them. It's hungry." And then the mirrors. Every single one of them, still covered in cloth, began to tremble. The fabric shook as if something behind the glass was pressing to get out. David stood frozen in the hallway, holding his breath. And then one of the sheets slid off. The mirror revealed not his reflection, but a dark, empty hallway stretching farther than the actual house should allow. At the end of that hallway stood a figure, tall, faceless, only its outline visible. And then it began to walk, closer, closer, straight toward the glass. David yanked the sheet back over the mirror, his hands shaking violently. He barely slept that night, and when morning came, he found something even worse. A chair in his kitchen pulled out, as if someone had been sitting there, watching him. By the third night, David had decided he couldn't stay. He packed a bag, determined to leave. But when he opened the front door, he froze. Instead of the street, instead of his car, all he saw was darkness, a black void stretching endlessly. The house wasn't letting him out. He slammed the door shut, panic flooding his chest. The whispers grew louder, circling him like vultures. And then, from upstairs, a voice called his name. Not a whisper, a clear, human voice. David. He knew he was alone, but against his better judgment, he climbed the stairs. At the end of the hallway, the East Wing door, the one the landlord warned him about, was standing wide open. A faint light flickered from inside, like a candle. David stepped closer, his heart pounded, his breath caught in his throat. Inside the East Wing, he saw them. Dozens of mirrors lining the walls from floor to ceiling. And inside every mirror, faces. Hundreds of them, men, women, children, screaming silently, their hands pressed against the glass. One of the faces looked just like him. And then The lights went out. David woke up on the floor of the East Wing, drenched in sweat. He wasn't sure how long he'd been unconscious, but something was wrong. The mirrors were gone, the walls were bare, and yet he still felt them watching. He stumbled downstairs, desperate to leave, but the front door wouldn't budge. He tried the windows, sealed shut. The house moaned around him, wood groaning like a living thing. That's when he noticed the photographs, framed pictures on the walls that hadn't been there before. Each photo showed the same house, but in different eras, 1920s, 1950s, 1980s. In every picture, a different family stood smiling in front of it. But the last photo made his blood run cold. It was him, standing at the doorway, holding the same bag he had packed the night before. And his eyes in the photo were black. The whispers swelled into screams. David ran, darting from room to room, but every door led back to the same place, the East Wing. The mirrors were back, this time uncovered, and in them, his reflection no longer copied him. It smiled, a slow, inhuman grin spreading ear to ear. "Give in," it whispered, though David's lips never moved. The reflection stepped forward, pressing its hands against the inside of the glass. Cracks spread like spider webs across the surface. David stumbled back, screaming, but the glass shattered, exploding into the room. Shards flew everywhere, and from the broken mirror, his reflection stepped out. It was him, but darker, paler, its eyes hollow, glowing faintly. The thing lunged. David fought, but his fists passed through the figure like smoke. The reflection wrapped its hands around his throat. His vision blurred. The last thing he heard was his own voice whispering, "Finally, free." Darkness swallowed him.